Well, let's talk a little about, you started to talk about this a little, about method and structuring sermons and the preparation process of sermons. So can you talk us through your method? Or methods for that matter. I don't want to suggest there has to be one.
So as a teaching students to preach, I had to figure out, after going through a PhD program, reading all the books, had this reading list, it's like, so how am I going to do this? And the first class I taught at Louisville Seminary, out of PhD school. So, I had read all the books. Yes. Oh, I'm ready. So I get there and, taking them through some of these methods. And so I had made my way through it at least about half an hour into the class. And it's like, I'm going through this thing. And had this African-American woman in the back of the classroom raise her hand and said, Professor Mumford. I said, yes. Does the Holy Spirit have any place in preaching? Oh, man, of course. So with all of my preparation for teaching students how to do this, somehow even though I had read Forbes at the time, but that was one book on the Holy Spirit, right? So somehow in all of my preparation, I had not talked about the place of the Holy Spirit in preaching. So from that day forward, the first thing I do when we teach the students about preaching is to begin with inviting the Holy Spirit into this process. Okay. So before you even choose your biblical text, because you need the help of the Holy Spirit to choose the text that will apply to particular people in a particular place at a particular time. So before you do any of that, invite the Holy Spirit into this process. And when that happens, then there is a much better chance of this sermon really being something that people will take with them when they go. All right. So part of that, so that's part of the process. But then you talked about voice and people finding their voice at some point. So for me, it's really important that people, even in the exegetical process, begin to use their own voice in preaching. And part of it is inviting them as they choose a biblical text, however they do it, whether they, if they free will Baptist, they can just open up the Bible and choose anything, or they have some other lectionary methods or something. However they get to it, then when they are reading the text, just ask of that text every single question they can think of. And write those questions down. When they do that, what they find is that my questions, based on my experience of life, are going to be very different than somebody else's questions. And so then go back and pursue those questions and research those questions, find answers. And even in that process, there's a perspective that's coming through that is uniquely theirs. All right, so that's part of the process, and then of course give them some different approaches for after they kind of come up with a theme. So we've looked at different books, Tom Long. We've looked at Jennifer Brooks. We look at different places, but they come and they have this theme, a very succinct theme for the sermon. Look at different structures, for the sermon, some possibilities of how to pull that together. But then also encourage them. It's like, okay, so now if you have a draft of this sermon, then now you need to somehow internalize this in some way. So I do encourage students to practice a sermon. Now, again, that comes back to what about the Holy Spirit, right? So why should I practice a sermon? Because then am I not then not relying on the moment, the Holy Spirit, and this like, well, okay. So now if you were in a choir, you guys rehearse. Right, and why do you rehearse? You rehearse because all the parts need to come together in a way that produce a musical melody. So there's a blend. So, and that happens when you have everybody knows the notes. Everybody works together. So you, as the preacher, some rehearsal. There's some internal. I guess by internalizing this message, what that means is that it is in your mind and in your heart in a way that it would not be ordinarily. And to me, some people say, well, then what about the Holy Spirit in the moment? I'm more open to the Holy Spirit if I have internalized this message because I have a foundation. Yeah, and I can pivot if I need to. If I'm looking out and I see and I feel something that needs to be said that is not in there, I am more likely to do it if I prepared than if I have not, right? And plus I just feel more confident as a preacher. I'm always nervous, no matter what, that has not gone away. But I feel more confident and that I've done all that I can do as a preacher. And I do believe that God requires that I just not stand up and rely on the Holy Spirit week after week, that I should do some work to try to make sure I have a word for the people. And if I incline my ear, God always gives a word, So if I do that, then I'm ready, and the Holy Spirit can still have its way in the moment.